Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about Boris Johnson, about what I think is probably the beginning of his downfall. I don't see how he can last very much longer given what's happened recently. But before I start, if you approve of what I'm saying, I'd be very grateful if you subscribe and like, and that will help me. So this last week or two have been, I think, have shown up Johnson's lack of judgment. Now, I've said before, for three very good reasons, he should never become Prime Minister. The first reason is that he's completely self-obsessed. Everything is about him, and he puts himself before the country. The second reason is that he's dishonest. Everybody knows he's dishonest. Everybody knows he's a liar. Everyone knows that when he says something, you can't trust what he's saying, which is a terrible, terrible a thing for a Prime Minister. And thirdly, as I think has been demonstrated over and over again, he's utterly incompetent. He is utterly incompetent. His judgment is hopeless. If you look at COVID, look at his judgment on the Patterson affair. Look at the mess he's got into with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, he just doesn't know what he makes poor judgments because he's not interested in the detail. He's not somebody who sits in Downing Street poring over detail all the time. He's a guy who prefers to be out in a high-vis jacket or walking around a hospital, having his photograph taken and making wisecracks. He wants to be the centre of attention. He loves being Prime Minister, but he hates what Prime Ministers have to do in terms of running the country and know what they're doing and so on. And I think this lack of depth to his knowledge, his judgment and so on was made so clear over the last week. He, I think probably one of the biggest moments of his life must have been when he was Mayor of London during London 2012, when he was able to stand on a world stage. The whole world saw Boris Johnson as a centre of this great event. And I think he probably thought that COP26 was going to be the same. I think he thought that he'd go up and he would be the star and the whole world would look at him and think, amazing guy and all the rest of it. And because of his misjudgment over the Patterson case, all the talk was about Sleaze. And of course this wasn't helped because of the business about Cox coming up towards the end of the week. And so he went up to Glasgow, as we know, and he gave a short presentation, 4.5 hours on the train to get to Glasgow and 4.5 hours back. He was up there for an hour giving a press conference and so on. And all the talk was about Sleaze. And he had to say, at one point he had to say, I do not believe this country is corrupt. And you think, can you imagine anybody else saying that? Can you imagine any other world leader saying, I don't believe my country is corrupt? Unless you're leader of Venezuela. It was an extraordinary thing to say. And so all the attention was really on corruption. And you could see from his body language, from his face, his expressions, you could see that he really wasn't comfortable with it. It wasn't what he wanted to be there for. He wanted to be cheered for having been a triumphant leader of COP26. And I think that again is another moment when he must have realised the game is up. I'm just not up to this. I'm just not up to this job. And when you look at his record and you look at what he's presided over, you look at the fiasco of Brexit and what damage it's doing. It's doing so much damage. Our exports to the EU are absolutely collapsing. And when you look at the mess he's got into with the Northern Ireland Protocol and so on, and there really isn't any way out. I mean, either he backs down and he accepts that the European Court of Justice will have decide on issues of dispute in the future, or he goes ahead and triggers Article 16 next week, which he could well do. But of course he knows if he does that, then the Americans are going to be, well, there's no chance of an American trade deal if he does that. And so he's got himself into this really difficult corner over Brexit. And then you look at the corruption. I mean, the corruption is staggering. There's a fantastic article in Private Eye this week talking about all the different firms who've made huge amounts of money and have got these fantastic, amazingly profitable contracts just because somebody in the firm has been a Tory donor. And it just absolutely reeks. And at the time of awarding all those contracts, there were plenty of firms who could have supplied PPE. There were firms applying to apply. I think 16,000 firms applied to supply PPE, and all ignored. And yet all these friends of Tories who had no experience in some cases, brand new companies in some cases, they all got these huge contracts. They've all become multi-millionaires. A lot of them helped by people like Patel and Hancock and Gove and so on, who've all got in to help their friends. Even Patterson, it's believed. And then there's the cash foreigners. I mean, it's absolutely obvious. If you're a big Tory donor, you can go to the House of Lords. You can sit next to Lord Cricketer, what's he called, Lord Botham. You can sit next to Lord Lebedev of Siberia. £3 million it cost you. And I think when you've got a Prime Minister who is demonstrating this corruption, that he's prepared to turn a blind eye to anything. I mean, talk about turning a blind eye. Priti Patel, in my book, not entirely in Johnson's time, but including previously, has broken the ministerial code 6 times. 6 times. But, as Johnson said, she has his 100% confidence. And there was generic, wasn't there, with that deal whereby he did he pushed through a planning application against the advice of his departmental advisors in order to save Richard Desmond £45 million. That's fine. He thought that was perfectly right. Even Hancock, he didn't want to sack him until he had to, because he was caught groping his girlfriend. And there's the question of funding, isn't there? Party funding. There's all this money pouring into the UK, which nobody knows really quite where it comes from. You know, all these thousands and thousands of very, very expensive empty properties in London, because it's just a money box. You know, London is a money box for international criminals all over the world. One of the most extraordinary things last week was that the head of anti-corruption for, of all places, Nigeria, he said that London was the most notorious safe haven for looted funds in the entire world. Can you imagine that? I mean, Nigeria, we all know about Nigeria, don't we? Internet scams and all the rest of it. We all think of Nigeria as being the most corrupt, extremely corrupt country. And yet, the head of anti-corruption in Nigeria says London is the most corrupt, not the most corrupt, the best place in the world to launder your money and hide your dirty money. And so when you've got at the head of government somebody like that who is setting such a bad example, it's hardly surprising that others are going to say, well, I'll have a bit of this. It's so easy. There's no danger. I'll get in on it. I'll buy myself a peerage. I'll get my mate a contract. I'm not going to get sacked for it. Johnson doesn't sack people. And so it's happened that, for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, we have a government that is just known for corruption and sleaze. I mean, the last time I remember any big scandal about sleaze, before the expenses scandal, which was a true scandal, but the last time I remember was somebody accused, Ian Hamilton, accused of taking £5,000 in a brown envelope for doing some favour for Mohammed Al-Fayed. That was a very long time ago. But there was nothing like this scale. And you see also with Johnson, you see all this business with his wallpaper, you see his holidays and who pays for and all the rest of it. It just, the whole thing absolutely stinks. And I think people in this country have a sense of what is right and what is wrong. I don't think people like cheats, especially when it's us. It is us, the taxpayer, who are paying for a lot of this. When they give contracts for PPE to people who don't know anything about it, and they're paying double the price, or whatever it is, they're being ripped off. It's our money. And I don't think people like that very much, and I think people very much disapprove. And I think for a long time, people have been prepared to give Johnson the benefit of the doubt. Oh, it's just Boris, isn't it? Whatever's happened. But I think now people are saying, this is enough. You know, this is too bad. And I think with everything else that's going on, what with the economy diving and prices going up and taxes going up and all the rest of it, and so many other problems that we're facing, and then the prospect of next week triggering Article 16. I mean, it's very difficult to see how he could possibly survive. And as far as the corruption by people in Parliament, I think it says if you're in Parliament and if you are earning your 80,000 and then you do deals or you take on consultancies whereby you're actually selling your contacts, your influence, I think that says a lot about your character. It means that you're dishonest, basically. I mean, you're trying to get away with it, you're trying to make money, and again, it's taxpayers' money. You're trying to get advantage for somebody you know, for which you're getting paid. And I'm astonished that some of these people are so stupid, really. If you take Patterson, now he got found out, didn't he, really? And the Parliamentary Standards Committee thoroughly investigated him, and they decided that he'd been guilty of egregious breach of the lobbying rules, because he'd been taking all this money, this huge salary, from somebody he was consulting for, and they got certain benefits from it. Now, when he was found out, all he had to say really was he had to say, look, I'm really sorry, and he could have used the excuse of his wife. He was quite prepared to use the excuse of his wife taking her own life when it came to the vote to set aside his judgment. He could have used that excuse. He could have said, look, I was under great stress, my wife had committed suicide also, and things were very, very difficult, and I'm very sorry, and I'll never do it again. And as a gesture of goodwill, I'm giving 25,000, 50,000 to charity to sort of as a gesture to make up for what I've done. Now, had he done that, most people, I think, would have said, well, he's a crook, he shouldn't have done it, but anyway, at least he's owned up, and he's been reasonably decent about it, reasonably honourable about it. Now that he's caught out, he won't do it again, and he would have gone back to his constituency, and everybody would have said, well done, Owen, and nice to see you back, and glad that's all behind you. And he'd have gone back carried on being an MP for as long as he wanted to, and then he'd have gone into the House of Lords. But what did he do? He said, no. The committee have found this, but what he said is, his argument was this: all the representations made on his behalf were made in writing. Had they been made verbally instead of in writing, the case would have gone the other way. Everyone would have seen that he was innocent. And that's what he stuck to. Now, Johnson, of course, was worried about the fact that the Standards Committee might be coming after him for his holidays and his wallpaper and so on. And so he wanted to get rid of the Standards Committee, so he came up with this idea that they would not confirm Patterson's his sentence, his 30-day suspension for the time being. They'd set it aside, and then they would scrap the committee and get in another one which could be Tory biased, and then they'd vote again, and probably Patterson would have got off. So Patterson may not have had any option, but nonetheless he sat through the debate, and of course the enormous scandal that broke up that followed all that in the papers and so on meant that Johnson had to back down. This was a really, really stupid misjudgment. The idea that he could so blatantly abuse what was already an established system by just sweeping it away and then replacing it with something which is more favourable towards him was really outrageous. And I think people saw that as being a really I don't know, just another example of Johnson's corruption and dishonesty. And this week we've had Geoffrey Cox. Now, Geoffrey Cox is, I have to be a bit careful what I say because he's a lawyer, not that he's ever going to see this video, I'm sure. But Geoffrey Cox is a man who's, well, I'd say he's, gives the impression of being extremely pleased with himself almost as pleased with himself as Jacob Rees-Mogg, though nobody, I don't think anybody in the world is quite as pleased with himself as he is. Anyway, Geoffrey Cox, it was found out he was, and you know the story, I don't have to repeat it really, but you know he was off in the Caribbean preparing a case of defence for the British Virgin Islands government. Spent a lot of time there, and he was even voting from the British Virgin Islands in parliamentary debates. He was filmed working from his on their business, working from his own office in Parliament, which is an offence. And he was caught out, and again, it turned out subsequently that he was earning 10 times his parliamentary salary. He was earning up to 900,000 or even £1 million a year doing legal work whilst being an MP. Now, most MPs, and many MPs have come forward and said that being an MP is a full-time job, and obviously it is. If you're representing 40, 50, 60,000 constituents, they're going to be bothering you all the time with their garden fence and the parking outside their house and not getting an appointment to the hospital also. And all the stuff you've got to do, you've got to deal with it. I mean, you can understand it's a full-time job, apart from what you have to do in Parliament. And Geoffrey Cox, it seems, has plenty of time to do all that, and at the same time do all this legal work, which is so lucrative. Latest thing is, of course, that he bought a flat back in 2004. The government paid the mortgage interest for whatever it was, how many years it was. I think they paid about 90,000 in mortgage interest towards this flat, which cost £535,000. He then decided he wanted to go and rent a flat somewhere else, so he moved out of his flat. He let the original one, moved into a new flat at £1,900 a month, and we're paying for that. So the government has basically paid £90,000 towards a property, a second property which he owns. And again, you have to worry, you have to wonder, this is a guy who would obviously, his reputation would be very, very important to him. You'd have thought it would be more important than anything. You would think he would be so careful never to do anything to damage his reputation. But it turns out, and it's all over the press everywhere, that he claimed 49 pence for some milk. Now, he charges his time out at £800 an hour. So if it took him 2 minutes to fill in his claim for a 49 pence packet of milk, that would have been £27 worth of his time. And then he claimed £4.99 for some weed killer for outside his constituency office. And you think, what sort of mind is it of somebody who's earning 80,000 in Parliament, earning 10 times that much, another £900,000 for work he's doing on the side as a second job, and he wants to claim 49p for some milk? And I think that in a way tells you everything about him. And again, it's a reputation shot, because that sort of thing hangs around with you, and it won't be forgotten. And I think because this is probably going to drag on a bit, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the electors of Torridge and West Devon aren't getting ready for a by-election before long. Now, the government has an anti-corruption czar, so everything's okay, nothing to worry about. He makes sure there's no corruption in Parliament, and his name is John Penrose. And he happens to be married to a lady called Dido, where is our £37,000 million Harding. And well, yes, he's a great guy. He voted also in favour of Patterson's conviction not being upheld. He wanted to remove the Standards Committee again and replace it with Johnson's Johnson-biased committee. Now, last week there was this huge story broke on Sunday about, it was in the Sunday Times, about the cash for honours, about all these people paying $3 million and going automatically to the House of Lords. And Penrose, the day after, this is the government's anti-corruption czar, the day after was interviewed on the radio on BBC, and he was asked about this question, the cash for honours. His response was, and I remind you yet again, he is the government's anti-corruption czar, and this was a huge story. It was all over the Sunday Times, it was all over on the radio, it was everywhere. He said he hadn't had time to read the article, and so he couldn't comment. And when pressed again, he said he wasn't able to comment on details he didn't know about. And you have to think, it's just making a mockery of it, isn't it? And he can do that, and he can get away with that because he's got the full backing. Him and his wife got the full backing of their friend Boris Johnson. Now I read Dominic Cummings's blogs from time to time, and he wrote a blog yesterday, and it was really quite interesting. Dominic Cummings has a big grudge against Boris Johnson. He really passionately wants to get rid of him, wants to bring him down, and that's understandable. I think it seems that it was Johnson's wife who insisted on Cummings being sacked. But he said a few interesting things in there, and it's worth reading. But one of the things he said that was interesting was that at the time of, in October last year, Johnson still hadn't realised the consequences of leaving the single market. He describes very graphically how he responded when it was explained to him. And he explains how Frost is just doing what he's told. I mean, there's nobody in this government who has a voice. There's nobody who can stand up to Johnson. Johnson is the government. Johnson is responsible for everything that we're suffering. Johnson is responsible for the destruction of our economy and for our being made a worldwide laughingstock. It is entirely down to him, so nobody else can be blamed. What Cummings did make clear also was the fact that that Johnson's wife has a biggish say in what's going on, and I must say that kind of makes sense, because we know that Johnson can't make decisions. He's no good at making decisions. That's why he relied on Dominic Cummings to tell him what to do in the beginning, and now of course he's got his wife doing it. And so really our fate, I mean, it is extraordinary this, but the fate of our entire nation, all 68 million of us, is in the hands of Johnson, who doesn't take anything seriously, thinks it's all a joke, all a jolly jape, and his wife. And I sometimes think you can imagine them late in the evening in Downing Street, had a few drinks too many, having a good laugh, and then deciding on government policy. And nobody's going to say you can't do this, you can't do that. Nobody will stand up to him. And so I think this pushing your luck, he's had a lot of luck. I mean, how could he possibly get where he is now without an awful lot of luck? But it's also a lot of chutzpah and a lot of sort of bluff and bluster and gift of the gab and being very entertaining and very charming and all the rest of it. And it's got him where he is now. But I think the whole thing is coming to an end. And I think we're going to see in the next few weeks more and more pressure building up against him, and I think it's only a matter of time before MPs start putting the letters in, or before maybe there's a ministerial resignation which will result in him being brought down. But anyway, that's what I think about it all. And if you watched this far, thank you very much indeed. And until next time, bye for now.